Welcome back to the Seed Savers Exchange grafting workshop. This is the third in a series of short courses that we've offered this spring, and it's one more step on the way to growing your own fruit tree. Earlier in the year, we grafted these trees and then stored them for a while. Our last session, we planted them in the garden or in the nursery bed. We're standing here in our nursery bed here at Seed Savers, where we have a couple hundred trees planted out from this spring's work. And the next step in this whole process is to control where the growth comes out on these trees. And by rubbing excess buds off, we just call it disbudding, we can put all the growth this tree has to offer out through one bud. And that's our goal. So let's look at this tree here. Okay, so here we have a tree that was planted out just a few weeks ago, and you're starting to see green shoots. The buds come out, they're a little red to start with. This one's turning green all the way up here. This cyanwood, I see 2 shoots coming off of that, and that's good. Even some of these just show a little bud swelling at this point, and that's still fine. So I want this shoot to be my chosen one. It's bigger than the upper one, so I'm going to just, without dislodging that cyanwood, I'm going to use my thumb and pick the bud off of there. So I'm going to put all the growth out that one shoot. Now I'm going to go down the rootstock stem and pick off all the other sprouted buds. Even some come from below the ground, so you want to work your way all the way down. Okay, there we have a clean stem, no extra buds. That one's going to take all the growth, and away it will go. We're going to look at another tree down the row here that's not quite as far along. Okay. Now on this tree, you see there's a little swelling on that bud, but not much. I'm hardly seeing green on it at all, but just the fact that it's swollen a little bit is encouraging. At this point, even if I don't see swelling, I'm going to let them go. There's always a chance, and I'm still going to rub the excess buds off the rootstock. They're just little red nodes. And so again, all the energy is going up that stem, and we kind of give it one last resort, and that's to push growth out this cyanwood. Okay, in a matter of weeks, you're going to end up with a shoot. This one's only about 3 inches long. Usually in the 3 to 6 inch range is when I like to do this. The stem is still really flexible. And all I'm doing here is turning it up so that it's going to grow straight up instead of having a sweep coming off the rootstock. There's nothing structurally wrong with the sweep, but I just kind of like to have a straighter trunk. It's really easy to come in when this is still flexible with a piece of masking tape and simply take that into an upright position. If that tape stays on for, say, 2 months, 3 months, it'll be the stem will be fixed in that upright position. The tape will degrade in the weather, and you shouldn't have to worry about it in the future. So with that, good luck with your grafts.
All right, so this is the recording of disbudding and taping up. Please go ahead and type your questions in the chat or raise your hand and we'll get to it. Remember that this is being recorded. I will send this out to you next week. So I already have a question here ready for you, Lindsay. Sandy is saying, I have leaves on the rootstock and there are leaves coming out beneath the grafting tape, but I can't tell whether those are coming from the rootstock or the graft. Should I take off the grafting tape?
The bud can certainly, a desirable bud on
the scion can push its own way through the tape. If you can't tell which it's coming from, I'd give it a little more time. I'd let it grow a little bit longer, another couple weeks. Usually the rootstock and the scion have different colored leaves. So when the leaves fully open, not just little scraps of leaf coming off the bud, but when you've actually got a leaf there, the rootstock leaves are gonna be shiny, whereas the apple variety that you grafted onto, it's usually gonna be a fuzzy, a fuzzier leaf, almost a little silvery tint to it. So you'll be able to tell the leaf colors apart between the rootstock and the scion growth. So give it a little more time. It'll become clear to you, I think.
Right. And I have a couple of people talking about their grafts didn't take. Let's see, I'm reading the wrong thing. Here it says one of our grafts didn't take, so we have a good rootstock still planted. Can we leave it in the ground and use it at a later date as rootstock for grafting new scion?
Yes, absolutely. You're going to basically grow it on for a year, because the next opportunity, there would be an opportunity to graft again late this summer. You'd have to use a bud grafting technique, which we haven't taught you yet, but certainly if you're able to surf the net, you could find out how to do that. At our location here, we're doing that in late August, once the buds on the trees are mature and the bark is still slipping. So those are two things you got to kind of match: the time when the buds are mature and the bark still slipping. The bark starts slipping around the summer solstice, but the buds aren't ready yet. So usually late August for us here in zone 4. It's just something you want to go out and check once in a while and see if everything's ready to go. And you could also grow it on for the whole summer. And then next spring, as soon as the ground's thawed, I'd go ahead and dig it up and make a graft like we've just done, store it, let it heal, and then plant it out just as we've done in this class. If you dig that rootstock out as soon as the ground is thawed enough to dig, you should be able to get a graft done. So now to do that, I would cut mine back. I told you I have rabbits that ate some buds. I'm going to cut those way back almost to the ground. And again, I'll force all the growth out one stem, one shoot, let one bud grow. And that'll give me a nice straight shoot that's young wood, really primed for grafting. And you'll get as big or bigger shoot than you had last year.
Right. And someone's asking, should they select a lower rootstock bud or keep a higher one if they're in this position?
If I'm saving a tree to graft next year, I'll cut it back as low as I can, so that it's I get a nice long shoot to graft onto.
Great. Okay, someone is asking, at what point do we take off the grafting tape?
The grafting tape will degrade in the sun. You will not have to remove it. It will happen for you. Usually a year goes by, the following spring, you'll still see remnants of it on there, but it's so broken down, it's not doing anything. And it's so I just leave it on.
Right. And what oh, go ahead.
Well, if as long as it has a little a little strength to it, it's gonna add to the stability of that new shoot. I have had graft unions break in high winds,
So I would not take it off until the sun breaks it down enough to come off on its own.
And would the same be true for the masking tape if you're for the taping up, or do you take that off later?
Taping up, yeah, masking tape will come off on its own too. Yeah. And here we use a plastic, stretchy plastic tape that's applied with a machine called a tapener. It's just so that if I've got 100 of them to do, I can do them really quickly. And even that, it's a little plastic loop that gets around it and you staple it. Well, that we don't even take those off because they will break down in the sun in a year or so. And it's not something we have to go back out and remove.
Right. Chris is asking, I have a couple of spots where I picked off buds on the rootstock and they seem to be sprouting again from the same place. I can certainly just pick them off again, but is there a way to take them off cleanly in the first place?
No, what you're experiencing are secondary buds. Now, every tree has the ability, when it loses a bud, there's material in there to sprout a second one. It's your job to be persistent about this. You're going to need to remove these until about midsummer, because that tree is determined to grow a shoot there. And so I would remove them now. I'd check them every 2 weeks at the most and keep removing them until you need to be more persistent than that little tree. I think you can do that, but it's the tree's notion to just keep cranking out of secondary buds, and it's their survival technique. You know, if they're in a plant in the wild and the deer comes along and browses all the leaves off, well, they're not dead, they just have to start over. And so you're just a very precise deer browse, taking all the unwanted buds off that root shoot. And that's what we mean about disbudding. You need to do it multiple times. I would suggest about every 2 weeks.
Right. How long do you wait for the scion to take? And I'm interpreting this to mean, especially if you don't see that there's buds yet, is it too late or might they still be coming?
If you planted them at our last, around the time of our last little meeting, you should be seeing growth. If you're not getting them to grow now, it's getting pretty late. You might just have rootstock. I will stress, it said in the little video to remove, even if you're not seeing growth, you should be removing the shoots on the rootstock, and that helps, you know, push nutrient up the stem to that scionwood, and you know, never, you know, we all do better with a little pressure behind us. So, but in the end, if they don't take, again, we've discussed, you'll always get another chance to let a shoot from the base grow. And so if you finally decided that the scionwood isn't going to be viable, go ahead and cut the tree back, train a shoot from the base, and you've still got a scionwood you can try again on. There is a common thing in horticulture on woody plants, what we call the thumbnail or scratch test. And if you take your thumb and scratch the bark up on the scionwood, if they're totally, if that scion piece is dead, you'll be able to scratch the bark and you won't find green under it. You should just be able to do it with your thumbnail. You certainly can do it down on the rootstock wood, but that, just take your thumbnail and scratch the bark. And if you're not seeing green under there, your chances are nil.
All right, I've got a clarifying question from Kai. And Kai, if I didn't get this right, please raise your hand and correct me. This is about cutting back the rootstock to graft later. If you're in that position, are you saying that you would cut it back now? And is that just for scion grafting? I think he means, is that just for bench grafting, or would that also be the case for bud grafting?
Okay, that's good questions. If I want to just grow it on a full year and bench graft it again next spring, I would cut it right now, right near the ground, with like one visible bud above the soil line, and train that one shoot up for the summer. And training is not a hard thing. You just let it grow and protect it. And you'll get a nice long shoot that you can graft onto next year. If you want to try bud grafting in the summer, I would not cut it back. I would just let it grow. And let all the leaves grow that it can, because every square centimeter of leaf surface is photosynthesis that feeds that tree and grows the biggest. It's nice to bud graft onto a great big healthy rootstock. So when you do that bud grafting work, you'll then go in and clean a lot of the side shoots off, so you have a space to work with, but you leave some leaves on the tree because you obviously need the plant to keep growing for the rest of the summer, because the bud you insert will stay dormant clear until the next spring.
And someone's asking, could you just let the rootstock grow into a tree?
Yeah, so you received M7 rootstocks, which is makes a semi-dwarf tree, and to my knowledge, that doesn't make a decent apple. I mean, it would make an apple, but it wouldn't make a pleasant apple to eat. There are some rootstocks used that are, culinarily acceptable. One of the ones we use for standard trees is a Antonovka, which is a big yellow summer apple, and it's quite tasty. So in that case, you could let that grow. But this one, but now you can, you could grow that on. There's another grafting method called top working. You could let that grow till it's a 2-inch diameter trunk and then top work it, which means you just cut the top off and stick in some scions around the top. The timing's got to be pretty precise on that, that can be done as well. But all of those are things we haven't really taught that here. So we're really trying to focus on the bench grafting, which is a pretty successful method for the home grafter.
We have someone asking, they say that their scions dried out and died, even though they were in cool, moist conditions on the rootstock. Why would this happen despite a good connection?
Well, there's a lot of ways to cause a scion to not take. A lot of different, there's a lot of variables here. We're dealing with live tissue. If they spend a little bit too much time if they dry out, before you attach them, they could not survive. If they get dislodged while being stored, that could, say they started knitting together and then you bumped it. That would probably be the end of your chances. So too hot, too cold, too dry, dislodging, all those things could happen.
Right.
And I just, we don't want to hear about, we do want to hear about these things. We want to know how well people are doing with this project, but I would certainly encourage you to keep growing the rootstock and try again, because it's, I've had a lot of failures in my, you learn by doing this. You learn by having to regroup and do it again.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, I actually created a poll for any of you who want to let us know. We are curious how many of your grafts took. So I'm going to put this up and just give it a second for you all to answer if you want to answer. While I'm doing that, I want to say that I only have 1 or 2 questions left in the chat. So if you have questions you haven't asked, please make sure that you put them in now so we get to them before we close up. And I'm also noticing that a number of people are saying that they're just seeing buds for the first time this week. So that's kind of a hopeful sign for anyone who hasn't seen buds yet.
Yeah, we're here in a pretty dry period ourselves right here in Decorah, and it's been unseasonably hot and dry. So I have been trickling a little water around those trees to make sure they're getting all the moisture they need. But if they have moisture to the roots, the heat will actually encourage them to bud out. But there, it's a fine line. It could go the other way and dry them out too quickly.
All right, let me go ahead and end this poll. Thank you for those of you who answered here. I'm just going to go ahead and share it. It's all anonymous, but we can see the percentages of how well the people who are here feel like their grafts have taken. And this is kind of a spread, but it looks like most of you at least have one, and quite a few of you actually have quite a few. So that's exciting. All right.
This is very good to know. Yes, if I see somebody here has scratched the stem and it has green under the surface, I would still hold out hope on those. I wouldn't give up yet on them. You'll also see if the stem is drying out, if the cambium layer under the bark layer is dead, it'll dry out, and you'll actually see the surface of that bark shrivel a little bit. It'll look a little prune-like, because it shrinks and the bark, but the bark still the same circumference as it was, so it kind of crinkles a little bit, and you can see that on the stem. If it's fully if it's alive and well, it'll be a nice tight glossy surface.
Great. I have a few, I think remaining questions may not literally be about disbudding and taping up, but are still relevant. So I'm going to go ahead and start asking those. Justin's asking, when can I fertilize, with what and how often?
Okay. This first year, I would be pretty gentle with fertilizer. We certainly want to put some growth onto them, but I wouldn't go too heavy. Just an average garden fertilizer. I don't know. We all use different stuff. I would. I can't. I guess I don't have any specific recommendations, but however you like to apply your nutrients, if you use. I have trouble. I can't apply fish emulsion to anything because the raccoons come and dig it up. But a nice 10-10-10 fertilizer, or I wouldn't be so concerned about a heavy nitrogen dose. That potassium and phosphorus are very important. nitrogen is going to push a lot of leafy growth, and that is not what we want. We want a good overall tree development. Was that all the question? What was, I feel like I'm missing part of that. So
Yeah.
I guess the follow-up on that would be, in the second and third year, I feed them pretty heavily, because I want that tree to really put on a strong spurt of growth in the second and third year, so I can start shaping the tree.
Right. I think this is our young attendee here, wants to know if young trees can be harmed or killed by extreme cold weather when older trees would survive.
Well, young trees should survive cold weather. Depends a little bit on where you are. I was just reading a book that had lists of trees that are hardy in zone 2. So some varieties do better in extreme cold. As far as here where I am in zone 4, I've never felt that we lost a tree due to cold. And we recorded, I guess it's 3-4 years ago now, we recorded a single night low of -40 here. And I didn't really see any damage from that. Not that we want the trees to experience that a lot, but it's these trees are pretty tough. I wouldn't worry about them, and hopefully we won't see any extreme cold for a few months yet.
Right. Okay. Someone's saying, I planted my grafted trees just a week ago, watering like crazy because we're in a dry heat wave. My questions are about the second year budded Suncrisp trees that I purchased and planted 2 weeks earlier. I pruned as directed, and now they're putting out leaves and flowers like crazy, many coming directly from the trunk above the graft, but low on the tree. Should any of this be removed? Should flowers be removed to prevent fruit burden on teeny trees?
Well, the last part of that is yes, I would remove all flowers on a newly planted tree. That's going to demand a lot of energy, and you really want to just grow leaves that will then turn into trunk diameter. If all the leaves are on the trunk and not up on the branches, I would probably just for the first year allow them to grow. Hopefully by the end of the first year, the uppermost ones are in a good enough position, high enough that you could make a scaffold out of them. So you would then cut the tree off above them and remove everything below and keep like 3 or 4 branches at waist height or whatever you like, for your first scaffold. It's on planting a tree that's a year or 2 old. You can, you sometimes see that it's not pushing all the way up the tree, and that the tree's not dead, but it's just not going to be the shape that you bought it in. But if I just had the trunk leafing out, I would just let it grow for the summer.
Sounds good. Okay, we have someone saying that this is a little off topic, but I have a couple of apple trees that are 5 and 8 feet tall. This spring, we had a late freeze and we tried to save the blooms by spraying them with the sprinkler overnight. It seemed to work. Then about 3 weeks later, the ends of the branches started turning brown and dying. They have small apples on them, so we were very excited, but now not sure what to do. I tried cutting off the dead ends, but now more are dying. Any idea of what's happening or what this person should do?
That seems really odd. I think that we've had many years when we've had late frosts and we've had very low fruit production. It just is, if you've got a tree in bloom and you get a frost, those flowers are toast. as far as the twig dieback, I don't think that's a result of your your sprinkling in the cold. It would have had to been really cold to kill back a twig. So I worry a little bit about whether or not you've got a disease in it. You could have fire blight even. That sometimes causes young twigs to disform, to disfigure rather. So I'm at a little bit of a loss at that, because that's, that tissue that was grown last year, it should be pretty tough. So good luck. And if you get fruit, I'd probably limit the fruit if the tree is struggling. I would severely limit the fruit.
Yeah. Okay, I have someone who lives in a wooded area with old homesteads and is seeing some barely alive apple trees. They're interested in getting scion wood from these old apple trees for the sake of nostalgia, for the sake of nostalgia or historic info. But they're not seeing any vertical shoots within 30 feet off of the ground. They're wondering if that is a hopeless situation or if there's something they can do.
There are things you can do, and I've done this on old trees that are putting out almost no new growth. You can force new growth by simply cutting a limb off. If the tree is, you've got to be the judge if you want to disfigure the tree. But if I think I want to save this tree and it's got no new growth on it, to take a limb off, you're harming the tree, but it's kind of the last gasp. But if I take a 3-inch branch off somewhere down near the main trunk, and leave a stub, that's going to sprout with new growth next year. It's going to take a year to get this, but you can force a tree to produce nice scion wood by doing some drastic pruning. I have even cut trees entirely off and just leaving a stump, and I've gotten shoots off of those. It was kind of a last ditch attempt, but you can do it. So either take a stem off. I'd probably try to take a portion of the tree off, rather than take the whole thing off. But you can force new growth.
All right. Here's a new question. Would you still tape up the best bud on your scion if you're eventually trying to get an open center?
Yeah. An open center this is how I grow my trees at home. I have a scaffold at about my hips. So 32, 33 inches off the ground, somewhere in there. But to do that, I grow a straight stem and then I head it back at 3 feet or wherever I want, and get it to branch there. And then I just don't allow a new central leader to establish. But if you let your tree branch as low as they are now, you're going to have a tree that's pretty much laying on the ground, and that's going to be hard to protect from the rodents. So you want at least a 24-inch stem that you can put some hardware cloth around or whatever to keep the rodents off of it. And and then branch above that. And you can decide if you want them at, 26 inches, 30 inches, 40 inches, whatever. We have been pushing our lowest scaffolds up here at the Seed Saver Orchard higher because we tend to get under there with a mower to maintain the vegetation under them. And so we want.
Lindsay, can I interrupt you for a second? I'm realizing we have a question, a clarifying question. Can you describe what a scaffold is?
Okay, sorry. The scaffold, when we have a tree growing, a fruit tree growing, we would like to establish scaffolds, which is an area where we have 3 or 4 main branches coming off the tree. And you can decide where those are. You grow a straight whip, a single stem the first year. Second year, it's going to branch. So after the first year, if I head that back by cutting it off, right below that cut, I produce branches all the way around the tree. I select 3 evenly spaced ones and keep those, and that's my first scaffold. I want a tree to have branches that are coming off the tree at a 45 to 60 degree angle. And we had some talk about this in the second day of the original class, but that scaffold then becomes the main structure of the tree. So I've cut my tree off, created a scaffold. There will be another chance. It's like these secondary buds we've talked about. There will be another shoot come out, and I can then grow another central leader above that. I usually, in my own orchard, I either am open vase shape, no central leader above that, or I let a central leader go up to a secondary scaffold above that, about 3 feet above that. I'll have a secondary scaffold. You can create that shape. What you want is a well-shaped tree with a lot of air movement, a lot of sunshine through it, so that the whole tree can produce fruit instead of just on the outer edge. We leave a tree unpruned and we get fruit right on the outer edge of the tree, but we don't get fruit all the way through the tree. And the scaffold is a structural thing that you can create by careful pruning.
Great, thank you. It looks like I have 1 or 2 more questions here. So if you do have any questions left that you haven't asked, or if I somehow missed it and haven't asked it, please make sure you put those in the chat and we'll get those asked. I do see someone's asking about getting more scion. We don't sell scion in the way that you got scion for this class in any other time except for this class. You can get scion from the exchange, but that's only in a certain window of time. Off the top of my head, I don't actually know exactly what that window of time is, but I will look that up and send that information to you, along with a reminder of how to join the exchange. Lindsay, do you have any thoughts about just the general time frame? I'm guessing you also don't know the exact dates that you can get it from Seed Savers, but the general time frame of
I think the cutoff
scion in general.
I think the cutoff for ordering scion is the end of February.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Just because by then we're out there in the orchard pruning, and if you order scion wood and we've already cut most of it off the tree, we can't supply it. So I would get your orders in for next spring. As far as scion wood for summer budding, I'd talk to your friends, see who's got a tree they love, and borrow a few shoots off of that. For summer budding, you want growth that came out this summer. And you want those buds to have gone from green to, usually it turns kind of a cocoa or coffee colored brown to be a mature bud. But yeah, that's not something we're in the habit of supplying. There are repositories around, USDA has a big collection of apples out in Geneva, New York, and you can contact them and they'll send budding material in the summer. I have done that and I've had limited luck with it. I think shipping cyanwood in the summer is a challenging thing.
Someone just checked their tree freeze, and the new shoot on the cyanwood is already going straight up next to the graft. If that is the case, should they still tape it up, or is it good to go?
I would just let it go.
Great. Here's an interesting question. Is rootstock itself also somehow grafted since it's not from seed? How does that work?
Okay, rootstock is produced by cloning. And so if I say I'm in my garden and I don't know, everybody in the country doesn't have them, but in our neck of the woods, we get box elders coming up everywhere. It's a weed tree, fast growing weed tree. Well, if I just cut that off and don't dig the root out, well, I get a bush. I get 3 or 4 shoots out of it. Well, this is exactly what you do to produce a rootstock. And if you have a tree that didn't take, you could start your stool block now by letting that tree grow for a year and become established. Next spring, you'd cut it off a few inches above the ground and it would branch. You'd get multiple branches coming off of it. When it's 10, 12 inches long, you'd take the sweetest stuff out of your compost pile, maybe you mix it with a little potting mix and mound that around it and cover everything but just the tips of those branches. And it'd keep growing for the rest of the summer and it would root into that little compost mix you put around the base. Well, late fall, when the leaves drop, you could pull that compost away, cut it all off right at the ground, right where it came off the stem, and they'll have little roots, so you've just layered apple rootstock shoots. And the nice thing is that stool will do it again next year and again next year. So if you want a little clump that you get 10 to 15 shoots off of a year and have some rootstocks to work with, go right to it. It works pretty nicely. Just takes a little, you got to pay attention to it. When they get a foot long, you mount some material around it, and then harvest late in the fall. Then you should have some storage space available, a root cellar or something to keep them in till late winter when you start grafting again.
Right. I think I just have one more question, and this is a favorite topic here at Seed Savers Exchange. Maybe I do have more coming in. Well, I'll ask this one anyway. Do you have any tips for labeling these little trees?
Yeah, with a collection like ours, labeling is quite a important thing. In a home orchard, I think it's not as crucial, but here's the thing I would say, probably the most surefire way to do it is to make a map. There's so many labeling systems out there that don't last forever. We get these plastic tags, but you write on it with a Sharpie marker and that lasts 1 year at the most. I find I get a much longer image with a really soft lead, like a 4B pencil. Will stay on those longer. But even those in time can be a little hard to read. There are embossed labels. You can buy these. They look like a stick of gum. It's like aluminum foil with a cardboard inside it, and you can press on that and kind of incise the label, the word, and those last nicely, except you know, what if you tied it to the tree with a twist tie? They can blow off. I mean, they literally sit there and wiggle every time the wind blows, and pretty soon those break and they blow off. So I think the most surefire method is to make a map and then use one of these other methods, but you kind of got to keep renewing those tags if you want to tag on the tree. So I just, the first thing I do when I plant a tree in my orchard is to add it to the map. And my map even has dimensions so that I know that this tree was planted so many feet from the fence line, because you know, if I say that it's the fourth tree in, well, what if the second tree died? You know, it's just, it's a really big challenge around this place where we have, you know, 1,000 trees, varieties to keep track of, and to lose track of one, you know, has just wasted a lot of resources.
Yeah. Allison, who is the person who earlier talked about trees that you thought might have fire blight, looked up fire blight, thinks that perhaps that is what is happening to those trees, is wondering, so those are bigger trees. Are Allison's little trees that she grafted for this class, are they in danger?
Well, fire blight does spread. There are things you can do to mitigate that. You can, it's most often spread at blossom time, and it enters the tree through the blossoms, or it enters through wounds. So I would be careful not to prune late in the winter. You know, I'd prune early rather than late in the pruning season. You might adopt late summer pruning, especially if a tree doesn't produce fruit one year. I'm not totally up. We don't have much of a fire blight problem here, so I'm not totally up on it, but I believe that our treatments you can apply ahead of bloom time to avoid that. But yeah, fire blight is a challenging thing. It's a I've known people to take out entire orchards because of it. So you want to keep ahead of it. If you have it in a tree, especially a young tree, you can prune it out, but you need to cut way back from where you see any visible signs of it. And that's a lot of work and hard to do, you know, just because you're cutting half the tree away.
Okay. I have a question here. I have an apple that someone grafted for me from a very old tree. It's only a couple feet tall, but the first limb is as big as the tree itself and growing straight out. Should I leave the limb on?
Well, there's kind of a rule of thumb when a scaffold branch gets to be it's even a percentage of the diameter of the trunk, you want to take it off. You want the trunk to be, you know, if you've got a branch that's bigger than the trunk, something's out of whack. So, and by taking that off, you're gonna just like we talked on producing cyanwood on an old tree, you're gonna force new branching. if you make your cut properly, there'll be branches come off of that, and you can train those out to be its replacement. Orchards talk about renewal cutting, and basically if you've got a branch that's too big, or a branch that's not, too shaded out or not producing well, you can cut it back, force new growth. That new growth gets trained into be production wood. Your best apple production is done on branches on wood that is 3, 4, and 5 years old. So a production orchard is going to be cutting out any older wood. They want to keep producing that 3, 4, and 5-year-old wood. So if you've got a tree, a branch that's threatening to be bigger than the trunk, then I would take it off.
Right. I don't see any more questions. So if you do have another question, make sure to get it in there right away. But thank you all for being here for this. We are not scheduled to meet again until October, which feels so far away right now. So happy growing throughout the season, and save the date for Friday, October 13th, where we will talk about preparing your young tree to survive the winter. Lindsay, what should everyone be thinking about in between now and then in terms of these trees?
Well, just enjoy the process. I kind of love that notion of going out and checking my trees every couple of weeks. Anyway, mine are right in the garden. So I'll be hoeing up potatoes and stuff next door to them through the summer, and checking on them, keep those excess muds rubbed off. If you do get really good growth, if you're in a high wind spot, you might consider sticking a stake in next to them, taping them up so that they aren't going to get blown off by a high wind. And that's otherwise, enjoy the process. It's really gratifying to have those little trees growing up for you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay, for all of your answers and knowledge. And thank you all for being here. Have a great summer. And I will be sending you a video of this or a recording of this next week. And we will see you on Friday, October 13th. Have a good one.